This podcast is brought to you by A. Miller George Funeral Home, where each life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London Middlesex, both family owned and operated. By the Diocese of Huron, a community where families and individuals from Windsor to Owen Sound, Grand Bend to Port Rowan come together to worship and serve. And by Molly Maid. Make your home a healthy haven. Call Molly Maid London today.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever and wherever you may be. Welcome back. It's another edition of the Vicar's Crossing podcast, where faith intersects with the public square once again, and we intersect with you in your lives, and we thank you for taking the time to have us into your home or your car or your earbuds or whatever you happen to be.
Bathroom.
Maybe you're in the shower with your
Yeah,
shower radio.
yeah.
Yeah, whatever works.
Wherever you
But
are.
no, we really appreciate it. I'm Rob Henderson from Holy Trinity St. Stephen's here in London, Ontario.
He is too. Good fella. My name is Kevin George. I am from St. Paul's Cathedral in the heart of downtown London.
Better fella.
Yeah.
And today, special guests, Kevin. Here we are in our 10th season. It continues.
Yep.
And our 6th episode.
Yep.
And today we're going to be talking to a couple of folks we've got to know over the last little while with some of the ministry and work that we've been doing together. Well, not you and I together, but together with them, but in different ways. Kendra Fry and Graham Singh are going to be joining us. And Kendra and Graham are from the Trinity Centres Foundations. And if you've been in the Diocese of Huron and are listening today, you've probably heard about the Trinity Centres Foundations. But Kendra is an expert in arts and heritage and has been our key point person here in Huron Diocese. And Graham is the CEO of Trinity Centres Foundation and specializes in working with, for the most part, churches that are closed, including he's worked as a priest in the Anglican Church in England and in Canada. So we're going to be talking to them about a few things. Trinity Centres Foundation is a charitable organization that was created with the vision of lovingly preserving, restoring, and repurposing underutilized churches into community hubs and affordable housing. So needed. And Trinity Centres Foundations has been doing exciting work here in the diocese, and Kevin and I are on the ground level with that. So that is our connection with these folks. So we're looking forward to talking to them. And our parishes are going through some exciting developments right now. So we're drawing it all together. And if you're listening to this today and it's something that you've been thinking about maybe in your parish or your community about things and your buildings, and who isn't that what community doesn't have old buildings?
Yep.
It's not always talking about the building in one way or another.
And how many of our church communities are not, or at least should not be at the moment, because considering long-term issues around space and building and all that, because with our shifting demographics, we don't all have the resources to keep these buildings going the way they've been going. So
right. So how do we envision something new for these buildings that have served us very well? But now we need to look at other ways they can serve us and the communities around us. So we'll talk about that.
And of course, as we always do here, we begin by acknowledging that all of this, the buildings that we're talking about and church communities, are planted upon lands that are the original lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Lenapehoak, and Attawandaron peoples. We here in this part of the world where we record this podcast are connected with lands of the London Township and Sombre Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. We continue to learn the deleterious effects of settler colonialism and the ways in which we've benefited from that. Some of us who look like these two dudes on the screen here. And we're coming to grips with ways that we need to take ownership of that privilege and do the work for healing and reconciliation and walking the two-row path together. So we acknowledge our part in that and look to continue the conversation and the dialogue.
I want to thank our sponsors today here on the Vicar's Crossing podcast, to A. Miller George Funeral Home, where each life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London Middlesex, both family-owned and operated. And Dave Mullen, a great support to our podcast. And we thank you very much, Dave, and for everyone listening over at A. Miller George, hello.
Good people. Each and every one of them over there. Good people. Yep. You know,
our kind of people.
Our kind of people. They're a dying breed. Sorry
Here we
about
go.
that. No,
Yeah,
sorry,
I led you into that one.
sorry. Okay, so we also want to offer our thanks to the Diocese of Huron, which you're going to hear lots about today with Kendra and Graham here talking about what Trinity Centres are up to with us. But the Diocese of Huron, a community where families and individuals from Windsor to Owen Sound, from Grand Bend to Port Rowan, come together to worship and to serve. Our thanks to Bishop Todd Townsend and all those who support our ministry.
And of course, our good friends at Molly Maid, make your home a healthy haven. Call Molly Maid London today. Thank you to Tricia Listar for her continued support, and to everyone at Molly Maid, we say hello today too.
It's clean and squeaky at Molly Maid.
All right. Are you ready to talk Trinity Center Foundations, buildings, dioceses?
I am, and I'll tell you why. Because I think that sometimes, you and I, because we're in the middle of this, in our respective communities, we don't realize just how sort of, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to overuse the word radical or whatever, but how sort of out of the box some of this is. And I think that we're just sort of immersed in it. So we're having this conversation, and, we have this outlet, this podcast, and it occurs to us that, you know what, this would be really great for people to hear because, we're both in different stages of this at Holy Trinity St. Stephen's and at St. Paul's Cathedral. But in both cases, we're starting to bring our lay folks along into some really interesting conversations that require people to sacrifice and change and remodel who we are. And I think this could be a benefit to a lot of people out there to hear the kind of things that we're up to. So, and it's Graham and Kendra largely, she's been on the ground here working tirelessly. So it'll be great to hear from them.
All right. Well, let's bring them in. Kendra Fry and Graham Singh from Trinity Center Foundations. And Graham and Kendra joining us now here on the Vickers Crossing podcast, and we're so happy to have you guys aboard. Welcome, welcome.
How's great to be here. Yeah, it's great to see you guys.
Great, good. Now we were talking a little bit about before we brought you in about Trinity Center Foundations, but before we even get into that, we have some breaking news.
Breaking news.
I just saw on the ticker tape there in the newsroom. There's something that we're just finding out, and that our listeners are going to be finding out firsthand. So, Graham or Kendra, do you want to make this big announcement to us now?
I think we need to start by saying it's all Kevin's fault, because Kevin has basically been hanging out so much with all these municipal governments that we ended up realizing we had to decide: do we want to not scare the bishops? And so the name Trinity Centres Foundation works.
Yes.
Or do we not want to scare the government? In which case, we're going to have to come up with a new name. And in the end, we said, we're going to need the government and the foundations at some point here. And the bishops are already scared. So let's just go ahead and change the name. And we thought that's obviously a little bit of joking, a little bit serious. But then we started thinking, what's the end goal here of all this work? If we say, hey, all these churches are closing, or we should do cool things, or this is decolonization, or whatever we want to say, in the end, where are we trying to go? And that's where I think I get really excited about kingdom people, Christian people, societal change people, all lining up around the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Every single member nation, United Nations, signed those goals. And you don't have to be up for the super liberal version of things. You can be just on a very straight down the line: no poverty, no hunger, equality across so many different areas. These are things we all must care about. And number 11 is all about cities, sustainable cities and communities, which lines up with what we do as parish priests and community leaders. And that inspired us to form a new name, which is Re11.
There you heard it, folks.
Re11. There
it is here. So it's redeploying community real estate towards SDG 11, and it's all about giving rise to community. That's our strap line. Re11, giving rise to community. Isn't that cool?
I love
There's even a little yeast in there
too, because with the number of times that we work with arts groups as well, I often find myself thinking too, Graham, about levity, about joy and humor, and how we can approach difficult things with a levity as we leaven the
that's
bread,
awesome.
right?
And Kendra, you are so amazing on our team for that. That Kendra, Rob and Kevin, you've seen this a bit with Kendra. That Kendra, it's like when the things are happening, and it's like the stage curtains are about to go up and everything's falling apart. and you need to just pull yourself together and get her done. Kendra is amazing at that. And actually theater people and arts people have so much to teach us on how to do that.
Oh, absolutely.
Things are tough.
Well, that's great. Well, congratulations on the new name change. And so for those that are listening today, that if you hear us, saying Trinity Center Foundations or going back and forth between that and Re11, you'll know what's going on. But more and more will be moving into that new name that you guys are going to be having. We'll get used to that. So that's good news. All right, Kevin.
Yeah, so you guys, I'm just sort of getting people set up a little bit here, I guess. If you're watching this, you'll see that Graham is sitting in a beautiful sanctuary, which I think is in Montreal, St. Jack's. And Kendra is in a beautiful space as well, but I believe you're in Stratford, yeah?
I am, but it has the stained glass on the wall, which interestingly, Kevin, was left to us by the last owners when they heard what my job was. They left me that piece of stained glass, which came out of a local church.
Awesome. That's
Speaking
great.
of community.
Yeah.
So, you want to hear our best story about stained glass, Kevin?
Yeah.
Sure. Let's have it.
And it kind of brings us into where this work is going. We heard of this one church that had bought an old United Church, and this was an independent church, evangelical. And the United Church was so annoyed that this evangelical church was going to buy it. They said, we're going to take out all our stained glass windows before we sell this church. And they took them all out and they moved into another United Church, which was based out of a community center school type of church. And those stained glass windows sat in a box for 10 years. And during that 10 years, that church went on to form the greatest food security group in Guelph, Ontario. Absolutely outstanding work. And just loved the poor, grew the church. And 10 years later, that church went back with that box of windows and said, we are so sorry that we took those windows out because we didn't trust you. And that is right in the heart of the themes that we deal with, the transition of religious property.
Yeah. Well, listen, let's start there because, for those of our listeners, those who watch us, you may not be familiar with this incredible organization here in Canada about to be called Re11, which is the Trinity Centres Foundation. Perhaps one or both of you can say a little bit about what exactly your mission and mandate is, and then starting perhaps with you, Graham, and then on to Kendra, what each of your roles in the organization are, so they can learn a little bit about the two of you. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Kevin, and it really is just a pleasure and an honor to be with you and here, thinking of everybody tuning into this from around Canada. And I think that's where we start, is the question of realizing church is changing. We own all these properties. What are we going to do with them? The other problem of, if we didn't have to deal with these buildings, what would we do? What would the shape of church be? And we realized our imaginations would go wild in such wonderful ways. So it's both a problem and an opportunity of what to do with Canada's faith properties. My own background as an Anglican priest, mostly in England, where I was part of the formation of the Closed Churches team in the Church of England. I had originally grown up in Guelph, not far from where Kendra is right now, and a similar festival. The Elora Festival was founded by my school, Anglican school, St. John's Kilmarnock. So it's kind of Canada, UK, closed buildings, what to do with them. That was a starting point, and it's certainly my, as a clergy person, continuing, this is by God's grace, the fourth church that we've had the privilege of leading in Montreal, St. Jack's. It's been going for about 8 years now. And so to get to the end, last question there, Kevin, I before coming to this fourth church, and Kevin, Rob, you guys you've done your time, you've got your you got your war wounds in the church as well.
We have our credentials.
You have our credentials. That's what we call them, right? And before coming to this fourth church, I had said to God and my wife, and eventually to my bishop, Bishop Mary, Bishop, I can't handle just leading another church while we don't try to figure out how to fix the system here. So I need at least half of my time to try to figure that out. Started doing a doctorate, and then started a foundation and realized the foundation was exploding. Had to leave the studies aside for a little bit, which is another story. But that's how we started the foundation. And the foundation is really addressed at anything that we can do to try to address that problem. We'll tell you more about what we do, but that's certainly the why and what happened before. And then I got to meet actually, let me cue up Kendra on this, is that we started joking and saying, if you call 1-800-my-church-is-closing.ca, who are you going to get? Right? And it's like dial extension 1 for Kendra Fry.
There you go.
Dial extension 2. So we basically put up the bat signal and said, who all's doing this work? And that's how I met Kendra. And we have just loved working together, but she is a master in her own right, and she'll tell you her story.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I think the short version of what Trinity Centres does is we work to enhance the common good. And wherever we find the common good and in whatever framework, that's where we're meant to be. And so Graham and I have been talking a little bit about this lately. The majority of that work up front, because of Graham's background and because of the typologies and the opportunities available, has been in churches. But in general, what we seek for is transformation of Canadian society through the reinvigoration of not-for-profit lands for common good, right? Just a little thing, just,
Yeah,
off
just
the
a
side of the
small, you have a
desk,
small goal. Yeah.
just a small thing.
Yeah.
And the opportunity in that is immense to take this time of change and the things that we built. You and I were talking about this the other day, Kevin, the things we built in the 1950s, imagining that we would live in the 50s and 60s forever,
Yeah.
and reimagine them for a modern Canada and frame them to what common good looks like right now, while maintaining the heart of what they are and their mission-based orientation. So
Awesome.
for me, I come at that from the arts. My background is in theater. I was the general manager of Theatre Passe-Muraille in Toronto, amongst other things, and also from the National Trust for Canada, so from a historic landscape. But I'm only interested in historic buildings that are doing things. I'm not interested in museum pieces, right? So yeah, that's kind of our frame.
Well, and you're not interested in museum pieces, and still you hang out with the church.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
I'm gobsmacked. So listen, we're going to get onto some stuff here in Huron and so on. But before we do that, like you guys have had some pretty impressive, some people might use the word success, but you've had success stories. I wonder perhaps if each of you could share a little bit about a project you've been involved in. And I know for you, Graham, the church you serve is a good example, but you may have others, and you too, Kendra, about just what good examples of how you've repurposed space for the common good.
Yeah. Thanks so much. I mean, there's some easy examples. West Hill United Church, we helped sell to the Boys and Girls Club. We created a mortgage product for the church to lend its money back to the youth club, which allowed United Way to fund the rest of the grants needed to make that happen. And the church got to stay renting there on a Sunday. That's like a, hey, we're really happy about that. We helped get Knox Stratford sold to a developer who's agreed to keep the church in there for part of their worship space. And he's building some residential developments behind the church. That's a great win for us. That would be more of a market housing-based solution, whereas the other would be more of a community hub-based solution. So we've certainly seen some project-by-project wins. We've just got into the public domain now, a really interesting Indigenous-led mixed-use housing project in the Anglican Diocese of Capel, St. Matthew's Church. That was a church that was condemned by the municipality. It was in such bad shape. And by the way, most people, when they call us, they say, our church is falling apart. It's condemned. It will never be able to be repaired. They also then tell us it has the best acoustics anywhere, west of Edinburgh, and I think, okay, whatever. Usually the church isn't quite as bad as they think. Sometimes it's way worse. Of course, that's technical pieces of it. But those are a couple of practical on the ground successes. I would say, Kevin, for me, the success that we're particularly focused on at this time is the idea of realizing that if we go down these roads of repurposing on a cooperative basis some of these properties to become community hubs with multiple charities and nonprofits coming together, we could have all the king's horses, all the king's men. They may still not be able to put Humpty together again without different forms of financing. And that cannot only be grants. It cannot only be favorable lending from the existing landowner, being the church. We're also going to need another form of impact capital. And we've ended up being on the front end of what we would call a social purpose real estate impact fund. And we're launching the first of those of that type in conjunction with the Federal Social Finance Fund and some of Canada's leading foundations. We're going to be launching that later this summer. It's taken us a long journey to get there, but we think it's going to be a vital tool for moving forward.
And Kendra, some of the projects you've been involved in that you think like these are like really incredible?
Yeah, I think that the best projects that we've done involve bravery. And so bravery looks different in your context. Bravery looks like inviting in people who are different than you and that you're not sure about. And bravery looks like saying, actually, our mission here is done and we need to transform it to someone else, whether that be Indigenous leadership or housing or whatever the need is there. And bravery looks like saying we could do better if we brought a couple of churches together. And bravery looks like building 30 stories of housing in a place that you never thought you would, right?
Right.
And so when you look at what the landscape is, it's about moving beyond the concept of trusteeship as holding things as they are for all generations and thinking of it as holding it as the vision for the future generation. So Graham covered a lot of my favorite projects. I maybe would add St. Matthew's Lutheran in Kitchener, who has done incredible brave work to bring their congregation step by step into a new vision. And, you know, they've done that a little slower than I would like because I come from an arts background. So I like things to happen yesterday.
Yeah.
You guys both might have noticed.
Yeah.
But the slowness of that has allowed them to take each step collaboratively and collectively in such a way that they're now living themselves into a new future as both St. Matthew's Center and St. Matthew's Lutheran Church.
So
yeah,
what
I'm
does
quite
so
proud
what
of their
does
work.
what does that look like? What is St. Matthew's centered, and like what is the new reality?
Yeah, each of these is different. So they are what I think I would call scale one of several scales, and I think they know that. So scale one is just calling yourself something different, just manifesting it, simply saying that you can join us here and you don't have to say church, right? You can come here and we accept you as you are in the frame that you are. And for some people, the word church has some damaging connotations or some fearful connotations. So that's kind of a level one, you know, and then there's a level two when you look at like a Trinity St. Paul's Center for Faith, Justice, and the Arts in Toronto, in which they have a separate governance structure that oversees the building itself and is of equal power with the trustees and the church board. So what they're saying then is the trusteeship, the church, and the building's mission in the world are of equivalent value and missional outcomes. And then you get into a level three where you incorporate an entire new not-for-profit, you know, as we're now entering into with St. Jack's and Espace St. Jack's, that gives equal voice to all the partners within the framework of the buildings so that everyone feels more than welcome. They feel both welcome and responsible.
Interesting, yeah.
So that's kind of the levels that you work through.
I would respond to that same question, Kevin, with there's just so many angles of answering that type of a question. I'll never forget hearing about this church in England that had like 8 youth workers, and I was like, how do they afford 8 youth workers? What are they doing in this poor neighborhood in Montreal, in London, pardon me? And then I found out they had received £1 million grant from a very wealthy family that makes champagne, and I thought, okay, well they got $1 million grant. Now I can understand how that's working. In a lot of our sites, I think we have to make sure that everybody, when they're thinking about it, they're thinking about their local context. In a case like St. Matthew's, that church sold a massive secondary parking lot that they had in Kitchener for $8 million. That still left them a main parking lot and a huge church, a flagship church for the Eastern Synod of Lutheran Church, and a huge hall and room for development behind there. So that is a large, large site, like your site, Kevin, at St. Paul's Cathedral. So I would say one of the things, and one of the things to mention, and again, Kendra's absolutely right there. This is the things that we talk about in the public domain with St. Matthew's.
Yeah.
And there are quite a few churches where probably the number one, the single most important physical change in a church to get it down a community journey is to take out the pews. Because when we do that, we have our most valuable, most beautiful space becomes multi-use, not only for instructional worship, but for participative worship, conferences, concerts, events. And a lot of times people try to put the community stuff down in the basement or in the hall, and they say, let's fix it up, let's put lights. But people get it, right? They still say, okay, you fixed up the hall, but you're still telling me the most important stuff that happens here is in the sanctuary where you have communion. Are you really willing to put us artists into that space? And exactly back to what Kendra's saying with bravery. And that's where the more we go on, the more we say, come on, let's tear that Band-Aid off right away. Let's get those pews out. And it hurts. Sometimes we make jokes about taking them out in the middle of the night. It's actually not really a joke, but that's a story all across Canada.
Yeah.
Right. Well, there's been some great visioning and things happening in London right now. And so we want to kind of drill down to a little bit about the projects that Kevin and I and you guys are all involved with here. So maybe I could start a little bit with mine over at Holy Trinity St. Stephen's Memorial in London. And just for those listening that might not be familiar, as a little background, the church is currently located on a busy intersection in London in the South End on the corner of Wellington and Southdale, which which when the original building was there, it was specifically built for a community that was being built at the time that was serving veterans that were coming back from the war, and houses were and lots were being given, by the government to those families coming back and starting to raise their families. And the Anglican Church planted a church to help, support that area.
With beautiful praying hands.
Absolutely.
That shaped
Absolutely.
church, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so that's the was kind of the beginning of it all. But of course, here we are many, many years later, and that area of the city has not completely, but it's turned very much into a kind of a split down the middle, where one half still has people that live there in their communities, but on the other side of the street is tons of retail development and major thoroughfares and roadways and businesses. And so it's in this new space. And so the building is not only older, it's not about that so much, but it's about the community itself has changed.
Yeah.
So this is where we find ourselves today in 2024, and we've been having conversations with Kendra over the last couple of years, and with you guys, about what to do to move forward with this, and what a new vision could be for the community that is there right now, and how they can impact the new community that we find ourselves in. So there've been a lot of brave conversations that have taken place. As Kendra said, that's so important. So
Rob, it's kind of,
yep, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it's kind of fun to talk about your site from a few different angles for people who don't have no idea what's going on about that. And the one thing I would say is that there are some sites where residential property developers, you maybe have one or two that are suitable to helping you out. And they're so specific. Your site is one that just has excited so many different developers, and they're not just biting off on any property they can hang on to. It really has become a very strategic site in the middle of London. And it's, when you talk about the urban planning that got that site there, why would we put any less thinking in the urban planning to what's going to happen next? And I love how you have led that journey to giving that depth of thinking with the place that you steward. You've done an amazing job on it.
Yeah, and my folks have been willing to go to those difficult places. We give a lot of credit to those that are willing to say that we're going to be brave, and we're going to revision something that, even though it has emotional connection to us, and things might look different, and we might not even know what they look like down the road. And as Kendra said, that's some brave stuff. But maybe I don't know, Kendra, you could talk to this too, because you've been involved with us so deeply. But why did you think this project could work? Because I remember meeting you for the first time a few years ago, and you came and looked around, and I remember you nodding your head and nodding your head and looking and saying, okay.
Yeah. So we're supposed to, walk in, assess the thing, go back to the team, discuss it. I walked in, assessed the thing. You poured me a cup of tea, and I was like, housing.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's what it's meant to be, because there's an incredible amount of land, and you can have a new vision within that, and you can have a new neighborhood, and you can give the gift of additional housing stock into your community while still being sustainable unto yourselves, right? And you talk about bravery. The brave moment for you guys is just a story I tell to everybody all the time. Graham and I laugh. We always have our stories that we love to tell. But it was that when I came to you guys and I brought you the first drawings wonderfully done by Michael Ruth of Tillman Ruth Robinson. And it was just ideas, right? Just to give you a framework of what to think about. And we had your church and housing around it very sensitively put together. And there was an older gentleman, I'm going to say he was over 90, sitting in the front row while I was presenting this. And he put up his hand, and I thought, oh, here we go. Here it comes. And he said, why did you leave the church? And I said, what? He said, why would you leave it? It makes no sense there. Take it down. And I was like, okay, man. And then there was a lot of nodding, and I thought, well, we're in a different world now, right?
And we were so excited.
You can have your vision inside the new version,
It was so funny that happened, because we were so excited that the site has enough space where the church could theoretically stay, with enough room to see a significant enough residential development and its necessary services, both inside and outside of the building, near the hospital. And actually the church, the reason I pretty much do remember pictures of all the churches we're working with, but the reason I particularly mention it is that as a more modern, with more modern architecture of that kind, it's less oppressive for those who've traditionally been excluded from religious narratives, including Black-led, women-led, LGBTQ spirit-led, and Indigenous-led organizations and communities. And in that case, Rob, as you know, but just for the sake of our listeners, there has been significant interest from Indigenous communities with thinking about hospital access housing in that site because of where you're located. And the idea that you've got a church building that in its architecture might not be as oppressive to Indigenous persons because of its shape was just an interesting feature. Now, there may be other reasons why that building goes, and there are other buildings where that's really not the case, where the building screams colonialism. And then we have this weird thing that we do of dressing up like 16th century Englishmen. And then we say, well, we're not doing colonialism anymore. And there's times where, Kevin, you as a crazy Newfoundlander who dresses up in 16th century Englishman, but you do it with such joy and you're in the cathedral. It makes sense. But it doesn't always make sense in a more modern building and so to me the Anglican Diocese of Huron with its 150 or so churches has the ability to restate what it means to be Anglican in a region. And what you're doing, Rob, what you're doing, Kevin, you are both examples in that broad spectrum. And for us to be able to bring people from the municipality, the province, the academy, all those people have been part of these conversations. For them to see that diversity in responses is exactly when Kendra said, just seeing that kind of community value, that kind of bravery come forward. You're living it right now. It's probably our work with you guys in the diocese is amongst some of our most exciting, most fulfilling work.
Yeah. And I was thinking back to that meeting, Kendra. That gentleman stood out to you, but I don't know if you remember the one line that came out of that meeting. And there were a few people that, of course, at the beginning go, "No, wait a minute, I'm not.
What the hell?
I'm not giving up, man. Like this is, But there was one person that stood up and said something that resonated with me, and I still carry it today. And I think it's a message that if all of our parish communities and Christian communities could think about on some level, it could be very transformative. But basically, they said, look, when this place was built, it was built in order that those that came into this new community that was being built and those after would have a place to be able to be. Why can't we leave that as our legacy? Right? And
Exactly.
this was about, she was thinking outside the box of not something to keep, as you mentioned, but something to create for those that are going to be coming in the next wave, even in a different looking area. And that was at the heart of who we were as a parish. And that really resonated with me.
And that's trusteeship.
Yeah.
That's 7 generations.
Yeah.
That's looking beyond yourself.
Well,
right?
And what I love about that, Rob, is as you were describing the demographic that built that neighborhood and the shift in demographic now, right? Like if that's true, that parishioner's bravery to sort of say, look, we want a place where people can be. Well, that neighborhood now is multi-faith. It's multiracial. It's not just a bunch of white Protestant dudes coming back from the war.
Yeah.
Right. And
exactly.
and who live out their lives in all kinds of different ways. And when we can make space that looks more representative of the space that we're living in, like I think that's really what's and Rob's site, for those of you who listen to this from outside of the London area, is for me like one of the prime properties this diocese has. It's certainly here in the city, because it really is. It's on a corner of just one of the most Wellington Road comes off of the 401. You leave the 401 and in 2 minutes you're at the corner where Rob's church is, and it's a massive thoroughfare through. And I just think the possibilities and the accessibility of that place, incredible.
Yeah.
Kevin, this is as good a moment as any for me. I haven't had a chance to tell you this, but you're doing a much better than you could be doing version of showing visible diversity in the cathedral. And if there's ever a place where you could get away with being a bit more white, old-fashioned Anglican, etc., you're not doing that. I see very often you are a photographic storyteller in the social media. There's nothing that happens in your day that doesn't end up getting, posted in some way. And it's very brown. It's very Asian. It's very Black. It's, it's quite something. And I say that, here's another thing, that this is as good a place as any to have a little dig that I've been meaning to have for a little while. That
Let me have it.
I can't stand seeing any more photos of our House of Bishops in the Anglican Church as white as it is.
Oh, I thought you were going to dig
driving
me.
It's driving me nuts.
Go ahead.
No,
say
we've
more,
got
say more,
to deal
Graham.
with
Say
that.
more.
We've got to deal with that.
Yeah.
And when I saw a photo a couple of years ago of all those getting together to talk about theological education, and here we are, with Huron College thinking about the future of that entity. that also was 100% white group. Now the bishops get elected and it's a process we don't entirely control.
Yeah.
We do control who's involved in theological education, and it does matter. We cannot keep talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion and then have huge numbers of white faces. We have to deal with that.
And we do control who we nominate for bishops. And you know, like we just had Pentecost, you know, as you all know, not very long ago. We did service here. We had 12 languages. And I just said this to someone the other day. 8 of the languages, global languages that were spoken here, many from the global south in that service, 8 of the 12 were spoken by people who attend here regularly. Now, if I had to say that to most of my own people who look like me, they wouldn't believe that because we don't see them. So what I'm trying to do is make people visual to realize that this is, you know, there's more diversity here than we realize. And because and I see them sitting on the periphery of the cathedral. And that's physically a manifestation of what we've done with Black, Indigenous, persons of color, is they're out here and bringing that into the core of who we are in leadership, in liturgical leadership, in you know, in everything we do. And I've said this at some of our diocesan meetings. I was because we're hosting General Synod next year, I was added to the worship committee for General Synod a couple of weeks ago. I sat in a meeting and they were talking about all kinds of stuff. And I said,
do they know what they're signing up for when they let you in on that?
Clearly not. Clearly not. Clearly not. Because
I'm going to call Graham Bocut. I think he's going to have to review that one.
He's not on that group. But the thing is I said, I took a look around. We got talking about the possibility of languages or different music, you know. And I said, I just need to point something out here. Take a look. It was a Zoom call. I said, take a look at everybody's face on the screen. I said, this is a national planning. We're planning a national electoral synod, a primatial synod, and nobody here is not white.
That's not okay.
That's not okay. No. So thankfully the chair said, you're right, Kevin, and we need to address that. So they went back and they brought it, but the fact that that's where we land automatically is sort of shocking. So
there's a middle group in there as well of people that we've done this as the Anglican Church, where we've taken brown and Black people and we've whitened them up.
That's right.
To make them more palatable.
Yeah.
And I say this as somebody who grew up, you know, whose family left India in the 1830s for Guyana under a system of forced labor. Yeah. And I ended up growing up in an Anglican choir school, dressed up like a 16th century English choir school boy. It's the same uniform. It's still there. You can, you know, the whitening of our brown and Black people in the church is something we have to take seriously. Yeah. And we also have to take seriously how many Black-led and less privileged community churches we have closed. Yeah. Most of the churches we've closed in Canada, across the British Isles churches and the Catholic Church, they tend to be browner, they tend to be poorer. Yeah. Those are the churches that end up being developed. And the ones we generally get left with are the big white church on the hill, which is more beautiful and has more finials and costs more to renovate. Yeah. And it's another reason why, you know, and we should share that story, Kevin, that when we first started working for the diocese, we had said, you know, Bishop Todd was very keen to get going and not to, you know, to really bring in a system rather than a person. Yeah. And we see this in some judicatories, diocese presbyteries across North America, where there's a hope to bring in one person to lead property strategy. And then you usually try to find somebody who maybe was a property developer or wanted to be a property developer once upon a time, or whose brother was a property developer, and they talk about it. You know, often they're not the right person, but they're also definitely not the right system. And you think about, Rob, what you're doing on your site, good housing development, hospital access, etc. Kevin, what you're doing on your site, multifaceted, very, very large project, bigger than the one we just talked about with St. Matthew's Lutheran. And we got into this and we ended up saying, there were quite a few things that this is a fun story, is that at first we said to Bishop Todd, we should do a survey of all the 150 churches. We'll assess state of readiness and where we need to go next. And he said, that sounds like a good idea. We got started. And then he called us back the next day. He said, I don't have time to do the survey. I already know the top 10 we need to get working on right now. That's what got us down to Sarnia quite quickly, and quite a few other projects. Rob, we met you. We knew your project was coming alive quite quickly. But with the cathedral, we had said, let's not go to the cathedral because we don't want to scare them. And there are rumors. Canada's small enough, the rumors start going, right? And I know all the rumors they say about me. Kendra knows all the rumors they say about her. You know, Graham turns up, he's going to try to sell our church to somebody. like as in a housing developer.
Yeah.
Our pews are coming out in the middle of the night. Yes, we tell you that all the time.
Yeah.
We didn't want to scare the cathedral.
Yeah.
And then the cathedral wrote to us and said, why are you leaving us out? We want in for a crazy version on this. And your team have followed along with that. They brought you in throughout that process. And I think you're living as an example of where how bold and brave cathedrals can be.
So I want to get you to share a little bit about that too. So just again, as Rob did for our listeners, a little bit of context for those of you who don't know. So St. Paul's Cathedral is in the heart of London, and one of our former deans and later Bishop Bruce Howe was fond of saying St. Paul's is at the heart of the city with the city at its heart. There were times that this church lived that very well, and there's been some drift from that because we've sort of gone into a little bit of a bunker mentality through all of the stresses that go on in a downtown core in any major city in this country. So this community will celebrate 200 years in 2027. It began down at the Forks of the Thames with a small wooden structure, came up here to this site where it later burned, and then this building, original part of the building, was built about 160 years ago, and then it's been added on. As Kendra said, there was stuff in the 50s that spoke to, oh, look at us, we're drunk at post-war, we got all these people, which was more a blip than a reality. And so now we've got here in this space about 37,000 square feet of space. No, pardon me, 27,000 square feet of space, which is just like huge. Like that's a grocery store, folks. Like 27,000 square feet is a grocery store. And on any given day, you know, we occupy 1,000 square feet or a couple of thousand square feet in a weekday for sure. So what Trinity has done is they've come in and they've engaged the conversation around trying to create a space in the downtown core in a sort of a cathedral district mentality that will be dynamic, active, creative, and working with the city and with the creative sector hub to try and bring more traffic into our space. Now, we've got a downtown neighbor here that's getting ready to erect a 9-foot fence around our church. We're taking the opposite approach, which is how do we take down the barriers to try and bring people in? And there's various states of nerves about that in this place. But I must say, we've had some interesting work done lately, which has really moved things along. But I wonder, Kendra, or you, Graham, if you want, but if you want to say more about why this project was attractive to you folks as your organization, and what your hopes are for where it's going.
Yeah, anytime that you have as broad of a palette to paint with as St. Paul's Cathedral offers, then all opportunities open up, right? So for those who are trying to imagine this right now, we're talking about the better part of a city block, including, you know, church house, parking lot, cathedral, administrative wing, Cronin Hall, and then two office buildings at 7 stories and 8 stories, and the parking lots in between. That has the possibility to be transformative. And from the beginning, what the team at TCF was saying is, when we come to London, and the team from TCF is mostly based either now or recently in Montreal and Toronto. So this was a lot to say. We would say, when we come to London, we don't feel safe. Mm-hmm. We're anxious downtown at night. We don't know what's happened to London. I'm from Goderich originally, so I used to go there as a teenager. We don't know what happened to London, that everyone is in huge packs of people shooting up on the street. And that landscape, I want to say clearly, has transformed through some of the actions of the city in providing surround care for their street-involved people. And certainly I'm preaching that to other municipalities. They need to look at what the city has done, and the very sudden change, like 3 months, boom. Mm-hmm. So that was great. At the same moment as we were looking at, okay, how do we create home and presence and place and third place for people from all varieties to come together? And how can that look like neighborhoods? So, you know, with Sifton and Homes Unlimited, the announced retrofit of 195 Dufferin, which is currently an empty office tower, and by September of 2025 will be housing, a combination of affordable and mixed housing. What an amazing win as a place to start of trustees of a downtown core, right? And then the creative hub, in which we're going to be bringing all kinds of creative people who are young in their career into the cathedral to create in these various typologies that allow for a broad variety of different arts forms, from things that need audiences of 600 to things that need audiences of 10, right? You know, and I read a quote today that said that innovation requires low-cost failure. And so I really hope with the Incubation Hub, we're going to allow for innovation through low-cost failure. To come, join us, be supported, fail and succeed together, figure things out, see the other, get outside of your silo, and really build something beautiful. And then we're going to continue to work on the outdoor activations and the green space and all of the spaces around our opportunity. So we're incredibly grateful, Kevin, to have been given the opportunity, and Bishop Todd and the leadership who came before you, to be given the opportunity to dream with you. And as we've discovered this past week too, your congregation is very willing to dream with us.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
it's been really fun.
We just had sorry,
Okay.
Rob, I was going to say, we just had a congregational meeting on Sunday, and what was really neat was, you know, we had 100 people in church and 80 of them went into the hall, which that was a big deal for me, because I think sometimes I worry more about apathy than opposition. And if people aren't engaged in it, and they came in and people were excited. And just to follow on that, I was at the Altar Guild Social this week, and we all know in churchland, altar guilds can be, you know, those can be the ones, right? That's the constituency that you think would be most sort of heated about this, lathered
Usually
up.
good sherry, though.
Yeah. And I brought the
Still
booze.
the Anglican Church.
I
Let's keep it real.
I brought the booze, so it was all good booze. Okay, but listen, there were 22 women there, and every one of them were excited about this. And there were a number of them who said 6 months ago we couldn't tolerate this conversation about pews, but we're past that. You know, so like there's a real energy going on, and you know, we've renegotiated, you know, with the Siftons and Homes Unlimited, the building behind us that has been a commercial building, and that will be developed into affordable housing in the end of this year, into the early part of next year. And so these are exciting things that you guys are doing. So it's just neat to see people's hearts and minds coming along. That's the work that I get excited about.
Absolutely.
You know, right, Rob?
Well, I was going to say, without the community being able to say that we're bravely going to give up some things in order to see what kind of new life comes out of this tomb, if they're not going to do it, you know, then how do you move? We can stand up there all we want in our fancy gowns and say all this, but boy, when they in their heart, when they're ready to do this, and you see it in them, and we've had a couple of meetings where that movement's taken place, that's the most exciting thing, because it really opens the doors for the newness and the recreation of our communities, which is so important. So we got a front row seat here in London to a couple of these projects that we're involved with you guys. Sorry, go ahead, Graham. Yeah.
Well, I was going to just note for people a couple of the other urban conditions that are making things happen around the cathedral as they think about other cities. And I noted carefully, Kevin, that you said happening in every other Canadian city, this issue of on-street homelessness, a sense of insecurity. That observation of, hey, London's really feeling unsafe these days is also a post-pandemic reality. I would go further to all North American cities, and I'm privileged to be speaking at the International Downtowns Association global conference in Seattle about, and this cathedral district in London will actually be featured in my talk there. And what we've found is that this is a North American reality. And what do churches have to do with it? Well, at first we built downtowns and we put the churches there. Everybody came downtown for whatever version of the Lord's Supper was their ethnic background, right? The Scottish version, the Anglican version, Irish version, whatever was their thing. I'm sure the further you go out east, the more extreme that was, right? Of everybody going to their, and they would not cross over. If you dared marry a Catholic and you were an Anglican, I mean, anyways, we know
been
that's
there and done that, Graham.
Right? So, I mean, we know that's the structure of our Canadian cities. On the corner of Maine and Oxford, in every Canadian city is Anglican, Presbyterian, United Catholic, somewhere near a river. So then we decided we didn't like city centers after the Second World War. We want to build suburbs. So now, Rob, when you talk about people coming back from the war, building these churches, well, we evacuated city centers. And the question of, have we ever really re-engaged them? Well, one place we re-engage them is around transit-oriented, hipster developer, super small units of super hipster houses, very trendy, near a train station, near fast rail when you think about London that way, and wanting to be near services, wanting to be walking around. And so the younger generation coming in now and their expectations of urban development are a great friend for this kind of development. And in the case of London, you just draw the circle a little further. You've got a massive Catholic church. You've got a wonderful United Church that Kendra's done a lot of work with. The City Hall is right there. London Life, Canada Life are right there. And the city's major park is right there. So if you lose the three cathedrals, you have lost the heart of the city technically. And if you don't, like even things like saying, how do you get those 80 people to go from church to staying in the hall? Well, here's the next question. How do you get those 80 people to go from the hall to going out for lunch in a restaurant around the corner or going, and that now, I think we've realized we're actually starting to really be able to pitch that at a serious urbanistic level, which leads back to the idea of much more serious funding. And when you just take a breath and think, oh, this is hard. This was hard. This is still hard. Think, you know what? What is it in our pride that told us we had to fix this problem on our own?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing I was going to say, is that I think we all forget, or we often forget anyway, that our true north is Jesus. And
Amen.
And where we find our strength to do all this is about thinking about following in the way of Jesus. And that has never been static. And somewhere along the line, the church after the 50s felt that they'd reached the promised land or something, and that was a static way of following Jesus. I think these changes that Rob is talking about in his church with you guys and that we're talking about here, I think this is a faithful response to proper stewardship of what we have in front of us. It's what it looks like to, in this day and age, follow in the way of Jesus.
Yeah, Kevin, do you guys get those Amber Alerts? Is it called Amber Alert in Ontario, the same as in Quebec?
Yeah.
Can you imagine we had an Amber Alert from the Lord on his way back, according to the book of Revelations? And in that Amber Alert, it said, sell all your belongings and give them to the poor. Imagine we all heard that and we were convinced that it was from God.
Yeah.
And maybe he even added, I mean the buildings too.
Really?
Right? And we go back. So what was Jesus' property strategy? The guy owned no property. He had a super dodgy treasurer. And he seemed to have done all
dodgy. He was a dodgy guy, that guy.
Dodgy. The guy did not have his audited statements worked out. Judas was, anyways, my point is, what is it from Jesus' instructions that tells us we should amass wealth and property in the way we are? And what is it that would say the opposite? And how do we, if we recognize there's something true in what I'm saying, should we just sell it all? I think we have to engage that question. And we have to ask, what would we do if we did? We would still care about the center of our cities, and we'd probably still want to. So I think there's a way of us behaving as though we are trying to give away this wealth and control in an organized way, in an obedient way. And in doing so, I truly believe this is going to be a blessing for the church.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing what comes out of it here in London over the next little while for sure. And, I know there's just to wrap up, maybe just as a quick wrap up, there's a lot of folks listening from the Diocese of Huron today to our podcast. Can you guys divulge anything else that might be, you've got a few balls in the air in Huron that you can point to, or is there anything else going on?
Outside of London?
Outside of London,
tons of things. Oh my goodness. We're working with Brantford with Grace Anglican right now. So if you're listening from Brantford and you see a place for yourself to collaborate with Grace Anglican, who's done beautiful work and who I recently found out that Walter Gretzky served in their food program every week of his life until the end. So that's,
and it's another cathedral type building. It's just a beast of a building, isn't it?
Absolutely gorgeous building. So we're
Camp Huron. Camp Huron's cooking.
Camp Huron. Yep.
Lots of stuff in Sarnia. All the Sarnia people trying to do great things together.
Good.
There's lots of.
I'll be excited to hear how things evolve with the camp. I mean, Camp Huron. Rob is not a young guy, okay? But Rob,
that's nice.
But Rob,
thanks, buddy.
I didn't come from here, okay? I come from Newfoundland, where our day-to-day life was like Camp Huron, okay? So, but Rob, you went to the camp as a kid.
Well, I was 14 years old and in between grade 9 and 10 and about to go down a pretty dark path when I look back on it. And someone offered me a 2-week job at Huron Church Camp to go up for 2 weeks, and I could get all the candy I wanted and just look after a few little kids. and it changed my life that 2 weeks, right?
Wow.
And
one of
so
our
yeah,
in-house
I'd
development
like to see what
consultants, Rodney
happens.
Wiltz, he was the head lifeguard at Camp Huron.
There you go.
Lots of great connections.
And Rob and I can tell you, in parish ministry in this diocese, the people that we engage with on a regular basis who are most involved in our communities, it's incredible how many of them are they're Huron Church Camp or they're alumni from there. Like
the web is just incredible.
And some of these folks are talking decades later. Like it's
camp is impactful in that way. And the one other project actually that I wanted to feature that I think could be really impactful too is Ingersoll, actually. So St. James Ingersoll has bought a downtown front Main Street site, right?
The old Loblaws. It really was a grocery store.
They bought the Loblaws?
Wow.
They did,
Wow, they're in the Loblaws. Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take that, Galen. Take that, Galen.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, we'll be hitting up Galen for a donation. Don't worry, we're not going to miss him.
Sorry, let me rephrase that.
We love you, Galen.
Galen, you're a good guy. Help us out where you can, Galen.
Yeah, well, they're re-envisioning that, and there's also in the end going to be some affordable housing above that has been closed up since the 1970s and will be reopened over time as we get them on site there. And so it's nice to see that too. They sold one of these huge behemoths and went into the downtown core, right? And so bravery, again, adjustment to circumstances, asking yourself where you're meant to be and where your voice can best be heard and where can you do the most common good, right?
Awesome. Beautiful. I'm here wearing my CBC shirt, and it's I think one of our best CBC radio stories is the one that Kendra did with the tapestry program on a Sunday afternoon. If you ever missed that one, we had another really good one on the St. Jack's site, which it received over 1 million listens, if you can imagine. Awesome. It was hitting up with the current, and that was done by Kate McKenna. And there was another very good CBC radio story on the Ingersoll project, and maybe we could put a link to that here. It was just a real heartwarming story. The final thing I would say, just in terms of the rest of the diocese, is to remember, and we've been doing a little bit of this with University of Windsor School of Cities, Center for Cities, pardon me, is looking at the future of Western Ontario. All of the battery plants, electric vehicles, the connection to Detroit, Windsor, the whole Detroit-Windsor corridor on that front. This is a major, major thing. There you go. You got Tigers. I mean, look, this is major regional economic development. And if we could look at what Western Ontario is going to look like in 20 years from now, there are some churches that we probably are okay with selling, and Bishop Todd is doing his, and Archdeacon Tanya are doing their level best when there is a church that needs to be sold. We are now there to try to give as much of a view on that as we can before that sale button gets hit. And there are other churches where Bishop Todd in his vision has said, we need to really hold on to that. We've been trying to help him, give him the information he needs to do that, whether it's the parish or the diocese leading those conversations. But we're really trying to plan, what does Western Ontario look like in 20 or 30 years from now? What decisions do we make today that are going to create a kingdom future and opportunity tomorrow?
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's great. Well, Graham, Singh, Kendra Fry from Trinity Centres Foundations, aka Re11. Thank you so much for dropping by and being with us, and we look forward to continuing our work together and building that kingdom. And thanks for dropping by today. We appreciate it.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right, great to have Kendra and Graham with us, and so many exciting things happening, and so fortunate to be right on the edge of it, Kevin? Like to be living in it right now, and it's just, it's exciting, and we look forward to more coming your way. So stay tuned.
Yes, indeed. It's all exciting and petrifying all at the same time.
Absolutely.
And what I would say is that what's been impressive to me is, but I think it requires us to do work on our end, and I think you've done a very good job of that. And I know that some of the folks who were here before I got here and the lay leadership has done a good job of it here too. And maybe I've played a small role, but it's seeing the hearts and minds sort of move along with. And this is why, I keep going back to let folks. This is about following in the way of Jesus. Like that's the mandate here, right? So
yeah, exactly. And nobody ever signed up to walk with Jesus and it not be a few bumps, but but we're seeing some of the again, the new life that's coming out of some of these dark tombs and this chaos. And when you start to see that, there's a lot of hope. So that's great. Hey, thanks to our sponsors today on the Vickers Crossing podcast, A. Miller George Funeral Home, where each life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London Middlesex, both family owned and operated. Our thanks to the Diocese of Huron, and also, of course, to Molly Maid London. Make your home a healthy haven. Call Molly Maid London today. Great chat, my friend, and
Awesome.
we'll see you next time in the Vickers Crossing, everyone. And remember, Kevin, to always look both ways
before you cross the street.
Thank you for listening. Our hosts are Kevin George and Rob Henderson. Our producer and composer is myself, Ian, with original artwork done by Elizabeth Dodman. If you have any questions or want to know where to find us, tweet us at Vickers Crossing or find us on Facebook at The Vickers Crossing. If you have any other questions about anything heard on this podcast, leave us a comment or look in the description to find out more. Thanks!